Hi, Simon here for Your Analog. Today I want to show you a technique that I use, well, very often when I do kind of melodic work, and that is to extract or drive several voices from one sequence. I will be using step 8 for this, and this will drive the main melody. It might be something RP or just something nice. Now, because step 8 is also a sample and hold or track and hold, it depends how you set it up. I will probably be sending in some kind of random or chaotic voltage. So the ARP or melody that we create is not always the same. And for this, I will probably be using orbit 3. I might send it through bias 2 to get the waves to be above 0. It's not really necessary because step 8 samples stuff below 0 as well, but when I do that I have to keep it in mind when I start tuning my VCOs, because negative voltages will dive bomb them into earthquake territory. So anyway, there will be one main sequence with some randomization, and then I want to use one part of the same sequence, so one stage of step 8 in this instance, to transpose the same melody. Now I will be using an external quantizer for this. You can see it in the bottom row there. It's not strictly necessary, of course, but I want to keep it somewhat melodic in one scale. Especially when dealing with random voltages, I find that it pleases me more when the notes are somewhat chromatic or diatonic. The key to this is to mix your melody and your static, it's not static, but your offset, your transposition CV, to mix it together in some kind of utility mixer. I will be using add 2 for this. It's here. There's jumpers on the back of add 2 where you can just choose to let add 2 add the things, or you can set it to average, which means it will add them up and then divide the voltage by 2. This can sometimes be necessary when using it for mixing audio and really loud waves in amplitude. You can't add 2 waves fluctuating between 10 volt and minus 10 volts together and expect your system to handle the 20 volt jumps. That just doesn't work. So if you're mixing those kind of waves, you best set it to average. But when you're mixing CVs, and especially pitch CVs, it's important that you don't set it to average. So by mixing the melody and the transposition CV first, you can then route that through a quantizer. You don't need a fancy one. And then I can drive a voice with that. So there will be melody that's getting transposed. And then for the part that really makes it interesting for me personally is when you start using that same transposition CV to drive a second voice that's more tuned like a bass. And then you will start to see and hear that the melody and the bass line start moving together in interesting ways. And that's where I want to start. It's possible that I take it a step further by using 2 stage outputs of step 8 to drive the bass, so there's more variation. And I will probably use route 4 to make this work. So I'm filming this intro first in the hopes that something nice comes out of this idea. But let's listen to it first, and then we'll meet again in front of the rack to patch it up together. I hope you find some inspiration in this patch, and I hope you enjoy the video. There we go. The first thing that I want to do is create a simple voice. And I want to keep the voices basic for this example, because once everything is connected, it will get, well, pretty confusing. So why not use filter 8 as a voice? When I use the ping input here, I won't need a VCA to create some dynamics. Let me unmute my synths here. Okay. So this is just a sine wave. Let me increase the volume a little bit. There. And I want to use the scan output on step 8 to sequence this voice. Currently there's nothing connected to the signal input, but when I now connect a simple clock, I'm just using a clock from Pamela's new workout, you can already hear that we are indeed sequencing filter 8 with step 8. But like I said, I want to create some kind of dynamics. So let me ping filter 8 with step 8's clock output here. So that's already a lot less overwhelming. So that's always repeating, and I want this to be a little bit generative maybe. So let's connect an output of orbit 3 to the signal input of step 8. And as long as you have this switch here in the sample mode and this one in the cycle mode, each stage of step 8 samples the incoming voltage and sends it through to the scan output. When you select all here for the middle switch, these voltages are also held until the next cycle crosses that stage. If that makes any sense. Now I want this held voltage from the first stage here to add to the signal that we are getting from the full or scan output. This way our somewhat random sequence, and by the way, if you want to create some kind of repetition, you can mute like most of the stages. And then the randomness or chaos is only happening on the stages where you have the sliders, well, not completely down. For example, this here doesn't sound completely random anymore. So let's extract this first voltage here and let's send it to add 2. Let's also send this one here, the scan output, to add 2. And if we now use the sum of those voltages to sequence filter 8, you can hear that our melody is getting transposed every cycle. And this just depends on the voltage of the first stage here. Now, like I said in the long-winded intro, I also want to use this voltage to sequence a bass. And let's use a generate 3 here for a bass. Let's connect it straight to the mixer. Now you probably noticed that I didn't tune my VCOs beforehand. But what I do when I'm at this kind of stage where I want to add another voice, I just disconnect the volt per octave sequence of whatever is going on. So in this case, that's the melody coming from filter 8. I just disconnect this. And this way I can clearly hear my bass note, like the root note of the melody. And if I then unmute my VCO here again, well, like you saw, then you can tune your added voice to what you already had. And when I reconnect my volt per octave sequence, this should in theory be in tune. Now keep in mind we are adding discrete voltages here, which means that we are not really bound within some kind of scale, and that's why I will send all of this through a quantizer soon, but I just wanted to show you this first. So like I said, I now want to use the held voltage of this first step here that I'm now using to transpose my sequence for filter 8. I want to use this as a pitch sequence for my bass. And even though the melody is all over the place, you can clearly hear that now there is some relevance between our melody and the bass line. And I use this technique in some shape or form a lot, and you really just need one sequencer for this. Now there's methods for creating a patch where you can just set the voltages of step 8 manually, so you create your melody, but you do it in such a way that only the first stage is random. To do this you will need select 2 and probably some flip-flopping on compare to as well, but I leave that for another video, because, well, I still want to run this through a quantizer here. Maybe let's take pentatonic scale. Now I need to run the CV for the bass through the quantizer as well. There we go. And you can hear there's a linear relationship between the transposition of the melody and the note for the bass. Now if you find this a little bit boring, you can start attenuating or even attenuverting. That's not what I needed. No, that's not right. So you can take that CV that you're using for the bass and run it through an attenuverter to, well, change it a little bit. So with this attenuator completely to the right, whatever we are sending in is coming out at unity gain, but we can attenuate it to almost 0. But what I find more interesting is inverting it. So whenever the melody is transposed upwards, the bass note will go down. And depending on your patch, this can really create some cool movement and tension sometimes. Now for some additional variation, I want to make this trigger that is pinging filter 8 somewhat random but quantized to the beat. And this is something that I will probably also show in more detail in another video. But you can use compare to as kind of a rhythm quantizer. When you just send in a clock to one side of compare to, and then you send in a random voltage to the other side, and you start phase comparing them, and then the N output should give you a trigger whenever the voltage coming from orbit 3 is high at the same time as the clock is high. So this means that we have a chaotic but quantized trigger. And we can play around with this by, for example, increasing the frequency on orbit 3. And well, I can, for example, also do something with the bass here. Let's just do the straightforward thing and send it through VCA. So the output of my bass voice is going into the signal input. I could just melt my clock here, but well, I can also just use the out jack here on the first channel of compare, where the clock is connected to. Send this to the trigger input on contour 1. And then if I take the envelope generated by contour 1 and send this to the CV input. Now that's very aggressive. We can also melt the output of, well, we don't need to melt it, we can just use the inverted output to modulate one of the harmonic generators. The reason it's okay to use the inverted output for this is because these are bipolar. And maybe to do something with the melody, because it's getting drowned a little bit in the bass. Let's send it through the wave folder, because why not? And by the way, I did not send my output of orbit 3 that I initially used as a signal input on step 8, well, it's still there. I did not send it through a bias 2 because I decided against excluding negative voltages. And now I can bring up my bass. And let's just twiddle some knobs here. There is some external reverb. I didn't realize that I didn't turn it down. Well, in fact, let's bring it up. And let's bring in a little bit of delay as well. Let's try tapping in the tempo. So this is a way to create a lot of melodic movement without using several sequencers. I hope you try out something similar. If you do, please let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Bye.